Annalise Bianchi was convinced she knew exactly how her summer would go. As the up and coming star of Trattoria Fiorentina, her grand plan was to impress the city's most influential food critics, secure a few new cooking awards, and finally feel validated in the eyes of her demanding family. Enlightened by her grandmother's old recipe journal, Annalise had harnessed both tradition and innovation to create a niche in the culinary scene, fresh twists on Tuscan classics that never failed to enchant. If anyone questioned her creativity, she had only to lift the corner of a red checkered cloth and reveal a masterful plate of pasta, sprinkled with precisely the right ratio of herbs and olive oil, or a braided bread whose golden crust was brushed with smooth garlic butter. No one had ever dared challenge her skill head on until the day she met Morgan Ashford. Morgan strutted into Trattoria Fiorentina one sultry afternoon, hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a crisp white chef's coat embroidered with a name Annalise recognized from numerous culinary columns. While the name Morgan Ashford usually appeared next to glowing reviews and Michelin stars, Annalise had never actually encountered the person behind the accolades. The tension was immediate. Morgan was rumored to be fearless in the kitchen, not shying away from bizarre flavor combinations or flamboyant presentations. They had earned a reputation for extravagant tasting menus, peppered with glass like sugar decorations and edible flowers from far flung locales. Conventional wisdom and tradition had never held Morgan back, and they had just accepted a position in the very restaurant that Annalise considered her personal domain. Out of the corner of her eye, Annalise watched Morgan greet the staff with a confident smile that radiated across the gleaming counters. The sous chefs, used to Annalise's commanding presence, looked uncertainly between the two. Whispers passed among them, something about the National Cooking of the Heart competition that was coming to town in 3 weeks. It was a special contest not only designed to find the most passionate duo in the kitchen, but also held a romantic twist. Pairs would compete as cooking partners and potential suitors, all aired on the popular Food and Love channel. The winners would receive a generous prize, as well as the chance to helm a celebratory banquet for a VIP event at the station. Apparently, the restaurant's owner had suggested that Annalise and Morgan pair up as a star attraction, a notion that made Annalise bristle with disbelief. There was no denying that Morgan was good, too good, probably, and Annalise feared being overshadowed. More than that, though, she simply disliked the idea of relying on anyone else. Over the years, she had grown to distrust alliances in the culinary world. There was always some hidden motive vying for an upper hand, but the owner had made clear that cooperation between them was non-negotiable. Trattoria Fiorentina needed the media spotlight, and Morgan's name drew attention. Annalise and Morgan's combined star power would only elevate the restaurant's reputation. Reluctantly, Annalise agreed. She expected daily friction with Morgan in the scenes leading up to the competition, anticipating each day's confrontation as though it were an inevitable storm forming on the horizon. When they first tried cooking together, the tension in the kitchen was palpable. Both wanted to take the lead, both wanted to season to perfection in their own way, and both wanted the final say in plating. Within minutes, an argument broke out. Annalise demanded a classic presentation. No fuss, just authentic Tuscan style with fresh produce and the best olive oil money can buy. Morgan rolled their eyes. Is that all you aspire to? Because if we want the judges to pay attention, we need artistic flair. A swirl of saffron-infused foam or something that no one's ever tasted before. Furious, Annalise slammed a pan on the counter. Traditional recipes have survived for a reason, she snapped. Morgan retorted with a sarcastic shrug. Their first day collaborating was more scathing than the peppers they were charring. The day ended with tension so high, the sous chefs gave them a wide berth, as though two purebred hunting dogs were circling each other, fangs bared. Annalise retreated to her tiny office at the back of the restaurant to recover. She recalled her grandmother's words. Cooking should unite people, not divide them. She rubbed her forehead, fatigue and frustration blending into one overwhelming mood. Perhaps she should try to talk to Morgan, find some common ground, or at least hash out rules for working together. The competition was scheduled for 3 rehearsals on live television in the lead up. They had to get this right. Her reputation depended on it, too. The next morning, Annalise arrived early in the kitchen to prepare for the lunch rush. She tied her apron with determination, brewed coffee, and arranged the fresh produce. She was in the middle of whisking a tangy dressing when Morgan arrived, surprisingly subdued. Without a word of greeting, Morgan rolled up the sleeves of the chef's coat and approached the station to help. The hush that followed was almost peaceful. As recommended by the owner, they were to practice a potential dish for the competition, a reinterpretation of bruschetta with a fusion twist. Annalise's instincts guided her to marinate tomatoes in balsamic vinegar and thyme. Morgan, watching with a skeptical tilt of the head, suggested adding a paper-thin sliver of smoked tofu, crisped on the grill and brushed with a hint of teriyaki sauce. "Trust me," Morgan said, voice low. "The savory, smoky flavor balances the sweet tang." Reluctantly, Annalise tried it. To her surprise, the brisk tang of balsamic married flawlessly with the tofu's savory undertone. For the first time, she shot a small, approving nod in Morgan's direction. They placed the final piece of basil on top together, and Annalise swore she felt a small spark of excitement. The combination was unusual, but her taste buds sang in delight. A wave of both relief and confusion washed over her. Could it be that they had potential as a team after all? The idea flickered, but she quickly brushed it aside, reminding herself that she had to remain cautious. Morgan's style was still far too unorthodox. When the restaurant finished serving dinner that night, Annalise and Morgan stayed late to prepare for the upcoming competition details. Under the fluorescent light, it became harder to keep up the cold, aloof facade. Morgan broached a topic that surprised Annalise: the place of emotion in cooking. Morgan admitted that, behind all the flashy techniques, what really mattered was making the food evoke a visceral reaction. "Whenever I think of cooking, I think of my mom's battered recipes," Morgan confided, carefully chopping shallots for a sauce. She couldn't follow instructions to save her life, but she'd toss in a pinch of this, a pinch of that, until it tasted just right. She called it the pinch of love. "Silly, but it made me want to be a chef someday," Annalise chuckled. "I can't believe you have a sentimental side. You strike me as all business and trying to break the mold." Morgan shrugged. "We all have a reason we started this journey." That night, they prepared a saffron-laced risotto that blended the old and new. Annalise guided Morgan through the slow stirring process that her grandmother swore never to rush. In turn, Morgan introduced a pinch of cardamom. The resulting aroma was a dizzying revelation of floral spice. They tasted spoonfuls side by side, occasionally grazing elbows in the cramped kitchen. Something unspoken laced through the air, but neither addressed it. Nevertheless, by the time they turned out the lights, wiped down the counters, and locked the doors, a subtle warmth had begun between them. It was not openly acknowledged. They only parted with a polite, "See you tomorrow," that lingered just a moment too long. As the first televised rehearsal approached, Annalise and Morgan found themselves unexpectedly aligning in creativity. Their practice sessions brimmed with new ideas, each layering flavor upon flavor. Fewer arguments erupted. Instead, they discussed with careful curiosity, listening to each other's suggestions. Even the staff noticed the shift. Where once they stood at the edges, waiting for disputes to break, they now found themselves peppered with requests from both chefs for a second opinion. The hush of built-up tension dissolved into a steady hum of productivity. However, an undercurrent of romantic possibility became harder to ignore. One evening, they were setting the table for a practice run, and Morgan's hand brushed Annalise's as they both reached for a porcelain spoon. Heat ignited at the touch, and for a split second they locked eyes. One breath, too, stretching into a suspended moment. Annalise was the first to break the gaze, cheeks flushed. "Sorry," she muttered, focusing intently on a stray crumb, so as not to betray the surprising jolt of electricity coursing through her veins. Morgan only nodded and cleared their throat, turning back to the pot simmering on the stove. That night, in their separate apartments, both replayed that moment over and over. Outwardly, they tried to remain practical. They were rivals forced to collaborate, and obviously this was all business. Yet the intense rush of attraction was undeniable. That fleeting moment felt like a catalyst they couldn't quite name. More than once, each found themselves drifting to sleep with a sense of excited trepidation. How could they feel so consumed with a person who, only days ago, had seemed a thorn in their side? The first televised rehearsal for the Cooking of the Heart competition arrived in a flash of camera lights and swirling crowds. Annalise had never been so nervous. Her adrenaline spiked the moment she saw the glint of the cameras, the flamboyant host in a sequined jacket, and the set's vibrant banners. In the green room, Morgan hovered near the mirrored vanity, adjusting the collar of the chef's coat for the third time. "You ready?" Morgan asked, voice steadier than expected. "Yes," Annalise said, though her voice trembled slightly. Then, before she knew what she was doing, she reached out and tugged at Morgan's sleeve, smoothing a crease. Morgan glanced down at her hand, brushing close to their shoulder, and smiled in thanks. The stage was set like a mini version of a professional kitchen. Their objective for this segment was to prepare an amuse-bouche, a single bite that would wow the judges. Prior to going live, they'd agreed on a raviolo stuffed with ricotta and lemon zest, topped with a dollop of tomato confit spiced with coriander seeds. For Annalise, it blended her grandmother's ravioli tradition with Morgan's preference for a surprising twist in the confit. When the camera started rolling, the pair worked fluidly in tandem. Morgan boiled the pasta squares, and Annalise piped the ricotta filling. Holding it up, Morgan quipped for the audience's benefit. "This is our little package of love, stuffed with the best ingredients. And, of course, a pinch of love." Annalise laughed, the air filled with a newly discovered lightheartedness. The audience responded with applause, and the judges appeared visibly intrigued. By the time they presented their amuse-bouche, the synergy between them was undeniable. The applause was thunderous, paving the way for them to be strong contenders. Yet in the hush that followed, as they slipped backstage to let the other contestants have their turn, Annalise felt a swirl of mixed emotions. Gratitude for how Morgan complimented her technique, pride in their success, and, beneath it all, a nerve-tingling awareness of how her heart thudded whenever Morgan smiled in her direction. Later that evening, to celebrate the solid performance, they decided to grab a late-night coffee at a cozy, tucked-away cafe. The smell of roasted beans and warm pastries enveloped them as they settled into a booth. They talked about their backgrounds. Annalise spoke of her grandmother's cooking lessons, the rolling hills of Tuscany, the smell of lemons outside her family's villa. Morgan chronicled a childhood spent in a small coastal town where fresh seafood and carefree salt-tinged nights shaped an adventurous palate. The conversation meandered from career aspirations to hidden dreams. At one point, Morgan confessed, "I've won a few awards, but I've also felt lonely. Everything's about the next level or the next hallmark of success. I miss the simplicity of cooking for people I care about." Listening to Morgan's quiet reflection tugged at something in Annalise. There was a vulnerability behind the bravado that she related to. She couldn't remember the last time she had such a sincere talk with anyone. In a wave of spontaneity, she asked, "Would you like to taste some of the homemade limoncello I keep at the restaurant? Maybe tomorrow after close." Morgan's eyes flickered with interest. "That sounds perfect." The next day, following their shift, they huddled together in the storeroom. Annalise carefully retrieved an unmarked bottle. Popping the cork, the citrusy aroma swirled between them. Morgan took a careful sip, eyes widening. "It's incredible. Almost too smooth," they said, letting the tang linger on their tongue. Annalise smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "It's my grandmother's recipe. Actually, she gave it my mother on her wedding day." Morgan raised an eyebrow, swirling the liquid in the glass. Wedding day? Annalise hesitated. It's considered a symbol of unity in our family, something about blending sweet and tart flavors. An odd silence followed, thick with possibility. A flash of tenderness passed across Morgan's expression. Slowly, Morgan placed the glass on a nearby crate. I think it's time we talk about what's happening here. The storeroom's overhead light cast a dim glow, illuminating specks of dust in the air. The hum of the restaurant's refrigerators droned softly behind them. Annalise's heart pounded. She had no idea how to put her thoughts into words. Morgan took the lead, stepping closer until they were barely a breath apart, their eyes locked, an unspoken question shimmering there. Annalise felt vulnerable, exposed. For so long, she'd believed there was only room for rivalry and competition, but now the heat she felt wasn't anger or annoyance. It was something else entirely. They didn't kiss that evening, but the moment hung between them, half finished and electric. A slight shuffle in the hall beyond the door startled them back to reality, reminding them they weren't alone. They separated, hearts pounding, cheeks flushed. With a shy exchange of glances, they silently agreed that it was time to head home. The days marched on, each new sunrise bringing them closer to the grand finale of the Cooking of the Heart contest. With only 2 rehearsals left, the hosts started implementing more romantic challenges they were asked to prepare dishes while offering gentle gestures or words of affection on live television. For some of the other pairs, it felt forced, a staged performance. But for Annalise and Morgan, their smiles and covert touches felt increasingly natural. When Morgan slipped an arm around Annalise's waist to reach for a bowl of seasoning, she felt her skin tingle under the brush of that gentle contact. And when they whispered quick suggestions or praises, they lingered just close enough to feel each other's breath. The final challenge was a full dinner service. On a grand stage with judges sampling each course, the audience would also witness the emotional dynamic between the pairs. Rumors swirled that the couples who demonstrated genuine chemistry might have an advantage in tiebreakers. A few tabloids speculated that Annalise and Morgan were no mere act, that something real had ignited between them. On the day of the finale, a hush fell backstage. All the contestants were tense, bracing for the biggest performance of their culinary lives. Annalise double-checked every last ingredient: fresh herbs, fish, citrus, and artisanal cheeses. Morgan carefully arranged the tools: delicate whisks, blowtorches, plating tweezers, ensuring their station was perfect. When their turn finally arrived, they walked on stage under the bright spotlight, hands nearly brushing. The host introduced them with flair, extolling their synergy and the buzz about their budding romance. Tonight, Annalise announced to the judges, we bring you a harmony of old and new. A seared sea bass crusted with herbs served over a creamy polenta infused with saffron. A bit of tradition from my heritage, and a sweet and sour lemon drizzle courtesy of Morgan's inventive flair. Morgan leaned in, adding, we want to show how 2 distinct approaches can become one perfectly balanced plate. The camera zoomed in, capturing each purposeful movement as they worked. The hush of the audience gave way to murmurs of approval at the mouth-watering aromas. When it came time to plate the final flourish, Annalise poured the lemon drizzle in a delicate swirl. Morgan sprinkled microgreens with precision, then added a spark of color purple pansy blossoms, providing a tiny burst of floral accent. Side by side, they garnished each plate with practiced ease, exchanging small smiles that conveyed more than words ever could. The host asked them to describe their inspiration for the dish. Morgan, glancing at Annalise, spoke quietly. Sometimes we think we have to fight each other for the top spot, but in cooking, as in life, if we learn to work together, we can create something we never believed possible. Annalise nodded, adding, and sometimes we discover that the biggest surprise isn't the dish itself, but the connection it creates. A hush settled as the judges took their first bites, eyes closed in concentration. The tension in Annalise's chest was almost unbearable. Morgan's hand grazed hers under the table, offering silent reassurance. Then, in a flash, the head judge's eyes flew open and a smile creased his face. Exquisite, he pronounced. The others murmured gleefully, praising the balance of flavors, the crispiness of the fish, and the unexpected sweetness in the polenta. Applause thundered through the studio, lights flashing in every corner. That night, after the cameras captured the final scoreboard, it was revealed that Annalise and Morgan had won. Confetti fell from above and the cheers erupted. The host extended a microphone, prompting them for a victory speech. Annalise was about to begin, but Morgan stepped forward. In a heartfelt, spontaneous moment, Morgan spoke. From the beginning, you all expected us to be fierce rivals, but in the process, I've discovered something beyond rivalry. I couldn't be prouder to win this with Annalise by my side. Then Morgan turned to her with a soft expression. The crowd sensed the moment and hushed, cameras zooming in. Annalise's heart pounded. She reached for Morgan's hand, lacing her fingers through it. Their eyes locked, and with a sudden burst of courage, she closed the distance. They shared a tender, lingering kiss right there under the stage lights. The audience erupted in cheers, capturing the very essence the competition was meant to showcase: passion, partnership, love. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Morgan grinned. I guess that seals the win. Laughing, Annalise answered, I think it does. The aftermath was a kaleidoscope of interviews, celebratory banquets, and opportunities. Trattoria Fiorentina instantly saw a surge in reservations, and critics clamored for new dishes bearing Annalise and Morgan's brushes of brilliance. Rumors floated that they might open their own place, or at least craft a new seasonal menu together. Their blossoming relationship captured the attention of lifestyle magazines, turning them into culinary sweethearts. One evening, weeks after the finale, they found themselves in the quiet hush of the restaurant after closing. Candles flickered on the countertops, casting dancing shadows. With no cameras and no onlookers, they were simply two chefs, toasting with homemade limoncello. Morgan set their glass down, linking arms with Annalise. In the warm candlelight, Annalise recalled how she had once scorned Morgan's bold style, labeling it flamboyant and reckless. Looking back, she realized that those were the very traits that inspired her to push her own boundaries. Meanwhile, standing in that soft glow, Morgan felt a wave of gratitude for Annalise's steadfastness and tradition, finding solace and warmth where, before, there had been only restless ambition. So, Annalise teased, what do you think is next for us? Morgan chuckled, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. I've been thinking of a new dish, perhaps a raviolo with a sweet fig filling and a salted caramel drizzle, or something reminiscent of that seared sea bass. Annalise laughed, leaning into Morgan's shoulder. We'll never stop cooking, will we? Never, Morgan whispered, and there was a softness in those eyes that made Annalise's pulse flutter. They raised their glasses in a silent toast, sealing a promise that transcended any single kitchen or plate of food. There were countless recipes left to discover, countless moments of warmth to share, but in that instant, they understood that the real recipe for desire was more than a mishmash of ingredients. It was the synergy of two hearts discovering the taste of something deeply authentic and undeniably passionate. And that was the dish they would cherish for the rest of their lives.